"You're nothing but a burden, Francis," my daughter-in-law screamed as she threw my belongings onto the scorching Houston pavement. At 68 years old, I had just lost my job and couldn't pay the $800 monthly rent to live in my own son's house. Madison Torres Blackwell, with her designer clothes and cold heart, gave me exactly 1 week to pack my life into 2 suitcases and disappear from their River Oaks mansion. "Find yourself a senior facility," she spat, "somewhere more suitable for someone in your situation." I stood there, broken and abandoned, watching my son Michael say nothing as his wife destroyed what was left of my dignity. They thought I was just a powerless old man with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. But as I sat in that dingy motel room 3 days later, going through my late father's old documents, I discovered something that would change everything. What I found in that worn leather portfolio would soon turn Madison's perfect world upside down, and she would regret every cruel word she had ever spoken to me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Let me take you back to where it all began just 3 days earlier. The call came at 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was sitting in my small room at Michael and Madison's house in River Oaks, Houston's most exclusive neighborhood, sipping coffee and reading the financial section of the newspaper. At 68, I still kept up with oil prices and market trends, a habit from my 43 years working in the petroleum industry. Francis Blackwell, the voice on the other end, was professional but strained. Speaking. "This is Janet Morrison from Human Resources at Lone Star Energy. I'm calling to inform you that your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. The company is downsizing due to market conditions." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had worked for Lone Star Energy for the past 5 years, ever since my previous company went under during the oil crash. It wasn't glamorous work for a man my age, mostly administrative tasks and consulting on older wells, but it provided the modest income I needed to contribute to my son's household expenses. "I see," I managed to say, though my voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "What about severance? 2 weeks' pay, as outlined in your contract. Your final check will be mailed to your address on file." 2 weeks' pay. At my age, with my limited savings already depleted from years of economic uncertainty in the oil sector, it might as well have been nothing. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my room, surrounded by the few possessions I had managed to keep after selling my own house 3 years ago. The framed photo of my late wife Sarah smiled at me from the nightstand, and I found myself wishing she were still here to help me figure out what came next. I had moved in with Michael and Madison when my financial situation became desperate. My son, bless his heart, had offered without hesitation, but I knew the invitation came with strings attached, specifically strings controlled by his wife. Madison Torres Blackwell was a successful attorney specializing in real estate law, and she had made it clear from day one that my presence in their home was temporary and conditional on my financial contribution. The house itself was magnificent, a sprawling colonial-style mansion with perfectly manicured lawns and a circular driveway that could accommodate 6 cars. Madison had chosen it specifically for its location and prestige value. Every room was decorated with expensive furniture and artwork carefully selected to impress her colleagues and social circle. My room was the smallest bedroom on the first floor, originally intended as a study. It contained a single bed, a small dresser, and a desk where I worked on my laptop when I wasn't at the office. The window overlooked the backyard pool area, where Madison often entertained her law firm partners and their spouses. I spent the morning calling other companies, hoping against hope that someone might be interested in hiring a 68-year-old petroleum consultant. The responses were polite but predictable. Too old, too expensive, not familiar with the latest technology. The oil industry had changed dramatically in recent years, and men like me were considered relics of a bygone era. By lunchtime, I knew I had to break the news to Michael and Madison. I found them in the kitchen, Madison reviewing legal documents while eating a salad, Michael scrolling through his phone while heating up leftover pizza. "I need to tell you both something," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Madison looked up from her papers, her expression already showing annoyance at being interrupted. She was an attractive woman in her mid-30s with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of polished appearance that came from regular visits to expensive salons. Everything about her screamed success and ambition. "What is it, Francis?" she asked, not bothering to hide her impatience. "I lost my job this morning. Lone Star Energy laid me off." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stopped mid-bite, his eyes widening with concern and something that looked like fear. Madison's expression shifted from annoyance to calculation. and I could practically see her mental wheels turning as she processed the financial implications. How much severance did they give you? Madison asked, cutting straight to what mattered most to her. 2 weeks. She set down her fork with deliberate precision, the small clink against the plate somehow sounding ominous in the quiet kitchen. Francis, she said, her voice taking on the cold professional tone she used in court, we need to discuss your situation here. And in that moment, looking at the calculating expression on my daughter-in-law's face, I realized that my real troubles were just beginning. Michael reached across the table and placed his hand on my shoulder. Dad, I'm sorry. We'll figure something out. But Madison was already shaking her head, her lawyer's mind clearly working through the implications. Michael, we need to be realistic here. Francis, how long do you think it will take you to find another job? I wanted to lie to give them hope, but the morning's phone calls had made the truth painfully clear. At my age in this market, it could be months, maybe longer. Madison's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the granite countertop. And your savings, minimal. The admission tasted bitter. Maybe enough for 2 months of basic expenses if I'm careful. She exchanged a look with Michael that I recognized all too well. It was the same look she gave him when discussing any major decision, the look that said she was about to make a unilateral choice and expected him to support it. Francis, I think we need to have an honest conversation about your living situation here, Madison said, standing up and smoothing down her designer blouse. This arrangement was always meant to be temporary. Madison, Michael warned, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Michael, this affects our entire family. She turned back to me, her green eyes cold and calculating. Francis, you've been contributing $800 a month to household expenses. Without income, you can't maintain that contribution. I understand that, I said quietly. But surely we can work something out temporarily until I get back on my feet. Madison laughed, but there was no humor in it. Get back on your feet, Francis. You're 68 years old. The oil industry is dying, and even if it weren't, who's going to hire someone your age? You need to face reality. The words stung because they echoed my own fears, but hearing them spoken so callously by my son's wife made them feel like physical blows. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew. I'm suggesting that you need to find alternative living arrangements. There are senior communities, assisted living facilities, places better suited to someone in your situation. My situation, I stood up, feeling anger rise in my chest for the first time since receiving the devastating phone call. You mean being unemployed? I mean being unable to contribute financially to this household. Madison shot back her professional mask, slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. Michael and I have our own financial obligations. The mortgage on this house alone is $12,000 a month, not to mention property taxes, insurance, maintenance. We can't afford to support a dependent. The word hit me like a slap. Madison, I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a little time to find work. Time we don't have, she snapped. Do you have any idea what it costs to maintain this lifestyle? The country club memberships, the social obligations, the professional appearances. I can't have my colleagues knowing that we're supporting unemployed family members. It reflects poorly on our success. Michael finally found his voice. Madison, that's enough. He's my father. And this is our house, she countered, whirling on her husband. Our mortgage, our responsibility. I won't jeopardize our financial stability for anyone, including family members who can't pull their own weight. I watched this exchange with growing horror, seeing my son caught between loyalty to his father and fear of his wife's wrath. Michael had always been a gentle soul, preferring peace to confrontation, but I had never seen him look so defeated. How long? I asked quietly. Madison turned back to me, triumph gleaming in her eyes. I think a week should be sufficient time for you to make arrangements. A week, Michael's voice cracked. Madison, that's not enough time to see. It's plenty of time, she interrupted. There are websites, agencies that help seniors find appropriate housing. Francis is an intelligent man. I'm sure he can figure it out. I looked at my son, hoping to see some sign that he would fight for me, that he would stand up to his wife's cruelty. Instead, I saw resignation and shame. He couldn't meet my eyes. I see, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Madison seemed to sense victory and pressed her advantage. I'm not trying to be cruel, Francis. I'm being practical. You need care and support that we simply can't provide. This house isn't suitable for someone your age anyway. No elevator stairs to navigate. You'd be much better off in a facility designed for seniors. A facility. I repeated the words, tasting their institutional flavor. Yes, where you'd have people your own age to socialize with activities designed for your demographic medical support if needed. It's really the best solution for everyone. I stood there, in their gleaming kitchen, surrounded by granite and stainless steel that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and felt something die inside me. Not hope exactly, but the illusion that family meant something more than financial convenience. "I'll start packing," I said. Francis Michael began, but I held up my hand. "It's fine, son. Your wife has made her position clear." Madison's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm glad you understand. And Francis, I'd appreciate it if you could be discreet about this transition. I have a reputation to maintain in this community." As I walked toward my small room to begin the humiliating process of packing my life into suitcases, I heard Madison's voice behind me speaking to Michael in the tone one might use to discuss taking out the trash. "Really, Michael, it's for the best. We can convert his room into a proper home office. I've been needing more space for my legal work." That's when I realized that to Madison Torres Blackwell I had never been family. I had been nothing more than a temporary source of rental income, and now that the income had dried up, I was nothing but a burden to be discarded. 3 days later, I found myself sitting on the edge of a sagging mattress in the Sunset Motel, a rundown establishment on the outskirts of Houston, where the neon sign flickered intermittently and the air conditioning unit wheezed like an old man with emphysema. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial disinfectant, a far cry from the pristine luxury of Michael and Madison's River Oaks mansion. My 2 suitcases sat unopened on the floor beside a cardboard box that contained the most precious remnants of my life. Inside that box were photographs of Sarah, my military discharge papers from Vietnam, and a leather portfolio that had belonged to my father. It was this portfolio that I now held in my trembling hands, its worn surface soft from decades of handling. I hadn't opened it in years. After Dad died 15 years ago, I had packed it away with his other belongings, too grief-stricken to deal with the memories it contained. But now, with my world crumbling around me and my future uncertain, I felt drawn to it like a moth to flame. The leather creaked as I undid the brass clasps, releasing the faint scent of old paper and my father's cologne. Inside were documents I remembered from my childhood papers that Dad had always treated with reverence but had never fully explained to me. Francis I could almost hear his voice, thick with his East Texas drawl someday. "This will all make sense to you. Someday you'll understand what your grandfather started." My grandfather Patrick Blackwell had been one of the original wildcatters in Texas back when oil was first discovered in Spindletop in 1901. According to family legend, he had staked claims on several parcels of land in what would later become some of the most productive oil fields in the state. But the Depression had hit the family hard, and my father had been forced to sell most of the holdings to keep food on the table, or so I had always believed. The first document I pulled from the portfolio was a deed yellowed with age and written in the formal language of early 20th century legal documents. As I read through it, my heart began to pound. The deed was for a tract of land in Liberty County, about 40 miles northeast of Houston. According to the document, the Blackwell family still held mineral rights to the property. I set the deed aside with shaking hands and reached for the next document. It was a geological survey report dated 1978, commissioned by my father just 2 years before his death. The technical language was dense, but the conclusion was clear. The Liberty County property sat atop a significant shale oil deposit that had been previously untapped due to technological limitations. "Jesus Christ," I whispered to the empty motel room. The third document was a letter from an oil company dated 1979 offering to purchase the mineral rights for $50,000. At the bottom of the letter, in my father's careful handwriting, was a single word: declined. My hands were shaking so badly now that I could barely hold the papers. There were more documents in the portfolio, updated geological surveys from the 1990s, the correspondence with various oil companies, and most shocking of all, a recent appraisal report dated just 2 years ago that I had never seen before. According to the appraisal, advances in hydraulic fracturing technology had made the Liberty County shale deposit not just viable but extremely valuable. The estimated worth of the mineral rights based on current extraction capabilities and oil prices was $50 million. $50 million. I read the number 3 times before it began to sink in. While I had been struggling to make ends meet, working odd jobs and living on the charity of my son and his wife, I had been sitting on a fortune that could have changed everything. But why hadn't Dad told me? Why had he kept this secret, even as he watched me struggle financially after Sarah's medical bills depleted our savings? I found the answer in the final document, a handwritten letter addressed to me in my father's familiar script. Son, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've finally found these papers. I know you're probably wondering why I never told you about the Liberty County property. The truth is, I was waiting for the right time, waiting for you to need it most. Your grandfather always said that oil was a blessing and a curse, that it could make a man rich but also destroy his soul. I wanted you to live your life on your own terms, first to find your own way, without the burden or temptation of easy money. But I also knew that someday when life knocked you down hard enough, you'd need something to get back up. That something is waiting for you in Liberty County. Use it wisely and remember that a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by how he treats others when he has the power to do otherwise. Love, Dad. I sat in that dingy motel room, surrounded by the evidence of a secret that had been kept for decades, and felt a complex mixture of emotions wash over me. Grief for my father, who had carried this burden alone. Anger at the years of unnecessary struggle. But most of all, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Power. For the first time since receiving that devastating phone call from Lone Star Energy, I wasn't a victim of circumstances. I wasn't a burden to be discarded or a problem to be solved. I was Frances Blackwell, heir to a fortune that dwarfed anything Madison Torres Blackwell could imagine. I thought about her cruel words, her dismissive attitude, her certainty that I was nothing more than a washed-up old man with no options. I thought about Michael's weakness, his inability to stand up for his own father when it mattered most, and for the first time in 3 days I smiled. Tomorrow I would drive to Liberty County and see the land that my grandfather had claimed over a century ago. I would verify what these documents promised, and begin the process of claiming what was rightfully mine. But tonight I would sit in this cheap motel room and savor the knowledge that Madison Torres Blackwell had just made the biggest mistake of her calculating life. She had thrown away a $50 million relationship for the sake of $800 a month. Madison Torres Blackwell was having what she considered a perfect morning. Seated in her corner office on the 32nd floor of the J.P. Morgan Chase Tower, she gazed out at the Houston skyline while reviewing contracts for a major commercial real estate deal. The coffee was perfectly brewed, her calendar was manageable, and best of all, she no longer had to worry about Frances Blackwell cluttering up her pristine home. It had been a week since she had given her father-in-law his marching orders, and she felt nothing but relief. Michael had been sulky for a few days, but he was already coming around. Men were so predictable that way they might grumble about tough decisions, but they always appreciated the results once the dust settled. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Mrs. Blackwell, I have a Jake Morrison from Lone Star Geological Services on line 2. He says it's regarding a property survey in Liberty County. Madison frowned. She wasn't handling any Liberty County properties at the moment, but geological surveys often preceded major development deals. Perhaps this was a new opportunity. Put him through. Mrs. Blackwell, this is Jake Morrison. I'm calling because we've been trying to reach the property owner for a mineral rights assessment, but we haven't been able to get through. Your law firm is listed as the contact for several properties in the River Oaks area, so we thought you might know how to reach Frances Blackwell. The name hit Madison like a physical blow. Frances Blackwell. What does he have to do with Liberty County? He owns mineral rights to approximately 600 acres of prime shale deposits out here. We've been contracted by Titan Energy to conduct a comprehensive survey for potential drilling operations. The preliminary numbers are, well, they're quite substantial. Madison's perfectly manicured hand gripped the phone tighter. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. Frances Blackwell is unemployed. He doesn't own any property. Jake Morrison chuckled. Ma'am, I'm looking at the deed right here. Patrick Blackwell originally filed the claim in 1902, and ownership transferred to his son, Thomas Blackwell, in 1947, then to Frances Blackwell in 2008, when Thomas passed. The mineral rights are definitely legitimate. What kind of substantial numbers are we talking about? Well, I probably shouldn't be discussing specific valuations over the phone, but given current extraction technology and oil prices, we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $60 million in recoverable reserves. The phone slipped from Madison's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto her mahogany desk. $50 to $60 million. The words echoed in her mind as she scrambled to pick up the receiver. Ma'am, are you still there? Yes, Yes. Did you say 50 million? That's a conservative estimate. Could be higher depending on the final geological analysis. Is Mr. Blackwell available? Titan Energy is very interested in negotiating a lease agreement. Madison's mind raced. Francis Blackwell, the broken-down old man she had dismissed as a burden, owned mineral rights worth more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes. The man she had thrown out of her house like yesterday's garbage was sitting on a fortune that dwarfed her own net worth by a factor of 100. I'll need to get back to you on Mr. Blackwell's availability, she managed to say. Sure thing. Here's my direct number. And ma'am, time is a factor here. Titan Energy has other properties they're considering, but the Liberty County site is their first choice. Mr. Blackwell could be looking at a very lucrative deal if he moves quickly. After hanging up, Madison sat in stunned silence, staring out at the Houston skyline without really seeing it. Her perfect morning had just turned into a nightmare of missed opportunities and catastrophic miscalculations. She had built her entire career on reading people, on identifying value and potential. How had she so completely misjudged Francis? How had she missed the signs that he was more than just a washed-up oil worker? With trembling fingers, she dialed Michael's number. Madison. What's wrong? You sound, Michael. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Where is your father staying? I don't know exactly. Some motel, I think. Why, what's happened? We made a mistake, Michael. A very big mistake. What kind of mistake? Madison closed her eyes, feeling physically sick as she spoke the words. Your father owns mineral rights worth $50 million. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that Madison wondered if the call had dropped. Michael, did you hear me? That's not possible. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. Dad's broke. He lost his job. His savings are gone. The Geological Survey Company just called me. They've been trying to reach him about a drilling lease. Michael, your father is rich. He's been rich this whole time, and we threw him out of our house. She could hear Michael's breathing rapid and shallow as he processed this information. Oh, God, he finally said. Oh, God, Madison, what have we done? What they had done was reveal their true characters at the worst possible moment. Madison had shown Francis exactly who she was when she thought he had nothing to offer, and now that knowledge would color every interaction they had going forward. We need to find him, Madison said, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. We need to apologize, explain that it was all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Michael's voice cracked. Madison, you called him a burden. You told him he was too old to be useful. You threw him out with a week's notice. I was protecting our financial interests, Madison snapped, but even as she said it, she knew how hollow it sounded. I thought he was a drain on our resources. He's my father. He's also a very wealthy man who now knows exactly what we think of poor people. The implications were staggering. Francis had heard every cruel word, witnessed every dismissive gesture, experienced firsthand how quickly their hospitality evaporated when they thought he couldn't pay his way. And he had endured it all while sitting on a secret worth $50 million. Madison's stomach churned as she remembered her parting words about maintaining her reputation in the community. The irony was suffocating. She had been worried about what her colleagues would think of her supporting an unemployed family member, when in reality she had been hosting one of the wealthiest men in Texas. Find him, Michael, she said urgently. Find him and bring him home, whatever it takes. But even as she said the words, Madison knew it wouldn't be that simple. Francis Blackwell had seen behind her polished facade and discovered the calculating mercenary woman beneath. He had learned exactly how conditional her love and respect really were, and now he held all the cards. It took Madison and Michael 3 hours to track me down. I was sitting in the Sunset Motel's parking lot, having just returned from Liberty County, where I had personally verified everything the documents had promised. The land was there. The geological markers were obvious, even to my untrained eye, and the Titan Energy representatives I had met with were practically salivating at the prospect of a drilling lease. I watched through the grimy window of my motel room as Madison's white BMW pulled into the parking lot, its pristine paint job looking absurdly out of place among the rusted pickup trucks and beat-up sedans. She stepped out wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most of these motel guests made in a month, her high heels clicking uncertainly on the cracked asphalt. Michael emerged from the passenger side, his face a mask of shame and anxiety. Even from a distance, I could see the tension between them, the way Madison's jaw was set with determination, while Michael looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. A soft knock came at my door. I let them wait for a full minute before answering, taking perverse pleasure in the knowledge that Madison Torres Blackwell was standing outside a Fleabag motel, probably wondering if she was about to contract something from the door knob. When I finally opened the door, the contrast was stark. There they stood in their expensive clothes and perfect grooming, while I wore a simple work shirt and jeans, unshaven and probably smelling faintly of motor oil from my truck. "Hello, Frances," Madison said, and I had never heard her voice sound so carefully modulated. "May we come in?" I stepped aside without a word, watching as she surveyed the shabby room with barely concealed disgust. Her eyes lingered on the sagging bed, the water-stained ceiling, the ancient carpet that had seen better decades. Dad Michael began, but I held up my hand. "Let your wife speak first," I said quietly. "I'm curious to hear what she has to say." Madison smoothed her dress and sat delicately on the edge of the room's single chair, as if afraid it might contaminate her. "Frances, I owe you an apology, a profound apology." For what specifically? She blinked clearly, having expected a different response. For the way I handled your job situation. I was hasty, and I didn't consider all the options. All the options. I repeated her words slowly. "What options did you have in mind, Madison?" "Well, we could have discussed a temporary reduction in your monthly contribution, or perhaps you could have helped with household tasks to offset the financial stop." My voice was sharper than I intended, and she flinched. "Don't insult my intelligence, Madison. We both know why you're here." Michael stepped forward. "Dad, please. We know about the mineral rights." "Ah." I sat down on the bed facing them both. "And when did you learn about those?" "This morning," Madison said quickly. "A geological survey company called my office looking for you. They mentioned the Liberty County property." "I see. And what exactly did they tell you?" Madison's composure cracked slightly. They said the mineral rights could be worth $50 million. "Could be," I nodded. "Actually, after meeting with Titan Energy today, it looks like the number might be closer to 70 million, possibly more depending on extraction efficiency." The color drained from Madison's face. $70 million. I could see her mental calculator working, multiplying the figure by all the ways it could change her life. "Frances," she said, her voice taking on a pleading quality I had never heard before, "I want you to know that money has nothing to do with why we're here." I laughed a sound with no humor in it. "Really? Then why are you here, Madison?" "Because we made a terrible mistake. Because you're family, and families should support each other through difficult times." "Family." I tasted the word. "Is that what we are?" "Of course," she said, leaning forward earnestly. "You're Michael's father, which makes you my father, too. I've always thought of you that way." "Have you?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where her BMW sat like a diamond in a pile of coal. "Tell me, Madison, what did you call me last week?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. You called me a burden." I turned back to face her. "You said I was unable to contribute financially to the household. You told me I needed to find alternative living arrangements because you couldn't afford to support a dependent." "I was wrong," she said quickly. "I was stressed about our own finances, and I lashed out unfairly." "Were you stressed about finances when you bought that new Mercedes last month? Or when you had the pool house renovated? Or when you spent $15,000 on that charity gala dress?" Each question hit like a physical blow, and I watched Madison's carefully constructed facade begin to crumble. "That's different," she said weakly. "How is it different? Those were investments in our future, in our professional image." "But supporting your husband's unemployed father wasn't an investment worth making." Michael finally found his voice. "Dad, please." Madison's trying to apologize. "No, son. Madison's trying to get access to $70 million. There's a difference." Madison's mask finally slipped completely. "Fine," she snapped. "Yes, the money changes things. Of course it does. But that doesn't mean my apology isn't sincere." "Doesn't it?" I sat back down, studying her face. "Tell me, Madison, if that geological survey company had called with different news, if they had told you I owned worthless swampland instead of oil rights, would you be sitting in this motel room right now?" She opened her mouth to answer then, closed it again. We all knew the truth. "I didn't think so," I said quietly. "Frances, please," she said, and now there were actual tears in her eyes. "I know I handled things badly, but we can fix this. You can come home. We can be a real family." "Home?" I shook my head. "Madison, that was never my home. It was your house where I was allowed to stay as long as I paid rent. The moment I couldn't pay you showed me exactly how welcome I really was. But now, I can pay. I finished. Now I'm suddenly worth your time and attention. Now I'm family again." She was crying openly now, her perfect makeup running in black streaks down her cheeks. "Please, Frances, please give us another chance." I looked at my son, who was staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. This gentle man who had never learned to stand up for himself, who had chosen the path of least resistance his entire life. "Michael," I said softly, "look at me, son." He raised his head, and I saw my own pain reflected in his eyes. "Do you love your wife?" I asked. "Yes," he whispered. "And do you think she loves you?" He glanced at Madison, then back at me. I hope so." "That's not what I asked." The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken truths and uncomfortable realizations. "I don't know anymore," Michael finally admitted. And in that moment, I made my decision. 2 days later, I sat in the conference room of Hartwell and Associates, one of Houston's most prestigious law firms, watching Madison fidget nervously in her designer suit. She had suggested this meeting, no doubt, hoping that the familiar territory of legal proceedings would give her some advantage. She was wrong. My attorney, David Hartwell himself, had been recommended by the Titan Energy legal team, a silver-haired man in his 60s with the bearing of someone who had never lost a case he cared about. He sat beside me with a stack of documents that would change everything. "Thank you all for coming," David began, his voice carrying the authority of 4 decades in corporate law. "Mr. Blackwell has asked me to facilitate this discussion regarding his mineral rights and certain family matters." Madison leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Mr. Hartwell, I want to be clear that we're here to reconcile as a family. Any legal or financial discussions are secondary to that goal." "Of course," David replied smoothly. "Mr. Blackwell has some things he'd like to say before we proceed." I stood up, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the room knew it. Madison Michael the First began looking at each of them in turn. "I've had time to think about our situation, and I've come to some conclusions." Michael nodded eagerly, hope flickering in his eyes. Madison sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "First, I want to thank you, Madison, for showing me exactly who you are when you thought I had nothing to offer. That was illuminating." She flinched, but said nothing. "You see, I've spent the last few days meeting with various people. Oil executives, financial advisors, charitable organizations. It's amazing how differently people treat you when they know you have $70 million. Francis Madison began, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. I've also been thinking about what my father wrote in his letter. He said that a man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by how he treats others when he has the power to do otherwise." I walked to the window, looking out at the Houston skyline. "You had power over me, Madison. I was dependent on your charity, living in your house, subject to your rules. And when I lost my job, when I was at my most vulnerable, you showed me exactly how you treat people who can't benefit you." "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "You made a choice," I corrected. "You chose to throw me out rather than show compassion. You chose your reputation over family loyalty. You chose cruelty over kindness." I turned back to face them. "So now it's my turn to make choices." David Hartwell opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "Mr. Blackwell has executed a comprehensive estate plan. Madison, as Francis's daughter-in-law, you should know that this will significantly impact your family's future." Madison's eyes fixed on the document like a hawk watching prey. "What kind of estate plan? I'm donating the mineral rights," I said simply. The words hit the room like a physical force. Madison's face went white and Michael's mouth fell open. "Donating them," Madison's voice was barely a whisper. "To the Blackwell Foundation for Displaced Seniors," I continued. "A charitable organization I'm establishing to help elderly people who have been abandoned by their families due to financial hardship." Madison shot to her feet. "You can't do that, Francis. You can't just throw away $70 million. I'm not throwing it away. I'm using it to help people who are in the same situation I was in last week. People who have been told their burdens, that they're worthless without money." "But Michael is your son," she cried. "What about his inheritance? What about his future?" I looked at Michael, who hadn't spoken since we'd entered the room. "Son, what do you think about this?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. "I think," he said slowly, "that you're doing exactly what Grandpa would have wanted." Madison whirled on her husband. "Are you insane? He's giving away your inheritance. Our future." "Our future was never built on Dad's money," Michael said, his voice growing stronger. "It was supposed to be built on love and respect and taking care of each other. But we failed at that, didn't we? We can still fix this," Madison said desperately, turning back to me. "Francis, please. I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. You'll what?" I interrupted. "You'll pretend to love me as long as there's money involved. You'll fake respect until the check clears." David Hartwell cleared his throat. "There is one provision in the will that the family should be aware of." Madison's head snapped toward him. What provision? Mr. Blackwell is establishing a small trust fund for Michael, $1 million to be distributed over 10 years. It will provide security but not luxury. 1 million, Madison's voice cracked. Out of 70 million, you're leaving your son $1 million. It's more than enough for a man to build a good life, I said, if he chooses to build it with the right person. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Madison understood immediately. You're trying to break up my marriage, she accused. I'm giving my son a choice, I replied. He can have a comfortable life with someone who loves him for who he is, or he can chase after money with someone who only values him for what he can provide. Michael stood up slowly. Madison, we need to talk. About what? But her voice had lost its fight. She knew she had already lost. About whether you married me or my potential inheritance. David Hartwell gathered his papers. I'll leave you all to discuss this privately. Francis, the foundation documents will be filed tomorrow morning. As the lawyer left, I looked at my son and his wife one last time. Michael, you'll always be welcome in my life, with or without money. But Madison, I paused, choosing my words carefully. You showed me your true character when you thought I was powerless. I can't unknow that. Madison's composure finally cracked completely. You're destroying everything, she screamed. Everything we worked for, everything we built. No, I said quietly. I'm revealing what was already there. The question is, what are you going to build now? I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back one more time. Oh, and Madison, you were right about one thing. I am nothing but a burden to people who only value money over human dignity. Fortunately, I've learned I don't need those people in my life. As I left the conference room, I heard Madison's sobs echoing behind me. But for the first time in weeks, I felt truly free. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Blackwell Foundation headquarters, a modest but dignified building in downtown Houston that had once housed a small bank. The irony wasn't lost on me. A place that had once been about accumulating wealth was now dedicated to helping those who had been discarded because they lacked it. Mr. Blackwell, a young woman with kind eyes approached me. The Martinez family is here for their appointment. I nodded and walked toward the conference room where an elderly couple sat nervously at a polished oak table. Roberto Martinez, 74, had lost his job as a maintenance supervisor when his company downsized. His daughter-in-law had given him and his wife 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. Their story was painfully familiar. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I said, taking a seat across from them, I understand you're facing some housing challenges. Roberto's weathered hands shook slightly as he spoke. Sir, we don't want charity. We just need a little time to get back on our feet. I understand completely, I replied, thinking of my own words in that gleaming kitchen just months ago. Tell me about your situation. As they shared their story, the job loss, the dismissive treatment from family, the desperate search for affordable housing, I saw myself reflected in their dignity and quiet desperation. By the end of our meeting, we had arranged temporary housing and job placement assistance for Roberto, funded entirely by the foundation. After they left, I sat alone in the conference room, watching the Houston traffic flow past the windows. My phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. Dad, can we have dinner tonight, just the two of us? It had taken him 3 months to file for divorce. Madison had fought it bitterly, hiring the most expensive attorneys in Texas. But in the end, she had lost more than just access to my money. She had lost the one person who had truly loved her despite her flaws. Michael now lived in a modest apartment near downtown, working as a freelance software developer. He seemed happier than I had seen him in years, lighter somehow, as if he had finally shed a weight he didn't realize he'd been carrying. That evening we met at a small Italian restaurant, nothing fancy, the kind of place where the food mattered more than the ambiance. Michael looked good, relaxed in a way that expensive suits and luxury cars had never achieved. How's the foundation going? He asked, as we waited for our meals. We've helped 43 families so far, I said. Temporary housing, job placement, medical assistance. It's amazing how many elderly people are abandoned by their families the moment they become financially inconvenient. Michael winced. Dad, You don't need to apologize again, son. You've done that enough. Have I, though? He leaned forward, his eyes serious. I let her treat you that way for months. I was so afraid of confrontation that I forgot to be a son. I reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder. You were caught in an impossible situation. Madison is a master manipulator. She had years of practice, making you doubt your own instincts. Still, I should have stood up for you. Maybe. But you stood up when it mattered most. You chose integrity over money, and that's not an easy choice to make. Our food arrived, and we ate in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Michael spoke again. Do you ever regret it, giving away the money? I considered the question seriously. Do you know what I did yesterday? He shook his head. I helped a 70-year-old woman named Dorothy find an apartment after her son kicked her out for being unable to pay rent. She cried when I told her the foundation would cover her security deposit and first 3 months' rent. She said it was the first kindness anyone had shown her in months. I set down my fork and looked at my son. That feeling, Michael, knowing that I could ease someone's suffering, that I could restore a little dignity to a person who had been made to feel worthless, that's worth more than any luxury Madison's money could have bought. Michael smiled, and it was the first completely genuine smile I had seen from him since he was a child. Grandpa would be proud, he said. I think so too. As we walked to our cars after dinner, Michael stopped and turned to me. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said in the lawyer's office, about building a life with the right person. Oh, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Her name is Sarah, like Mom, and she's a teacher. She doesn't care that I don't have a trust fund or a mansion in River Oaks. She just likes me for me. I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the wine we'd shared. I'd love to meet her, really. Even though she drives a 10-year-old Honda and shops at thrift stores, I laughed remembering Madison's horror at anything that wasn't brand new and expensive. Son, those sound like excellent qualifications to me. That night, as I sat in my own modest apartment, I had chosen to live simply, keeping only what I needed. I thought about the strange journey that had brought me here. Losing my job had felt like the end of the world, but it had actually been the beginning of understanding what truly mattered. I pulled out the letter my father had written, the one that had started this whole transformation. His words seemed even more meaningful now. A man's worth isn't measured by what he owns, but by how he treats others when he has the power to do otherwise. I had learned that lesson from both sides now. I had experienced being powerless and seen how some people treated those they considered beneath them. And I had experienced having power and discovered the responsibility that came with it. Madison had taught me something valuable too, though I doubted she intended to. She had shown me that there are people in this world who will only value you for what you can give them, and that recognizing those people early can save you years of heartache. The Blackwell Foundation would continue its work long after I was gone, helping elderly people who found themselves discarded by a society that too often measured worth in dollar signs. And Michael would build a life based on love and mutual respect, the kind of life his mother and I had shared before illness and financial stress had torn us apart. As for Madison, I had heard through Houston's legal community that she was now engaged to a wealthy oil executive, a man 20 years her senior with a portfolio that dwarfed even my mineral rights. I felt no bitterness toward her. She was simply being true to her nature, just as I was being true to mine. Sometimes late at night I would think about that moment in the kitchen when she had called me a burden. Those words had cut deep because they had confirmed my worst fears about my own worth. But now I understood that her words said nothing about me and everything about her. I was not a burden. I was a man who had lived through hardship and found purpose in helping others do the same. I was a father who had raised a son capable of choosing love over money. I was someone who had been given a second chance and had used it to make the world a little bit kinder. That was a legacy worth more than all the oil in Texas. Francis Blackwell's story reminds us of a fundamental truth that our society often forgets. A person's value has nothing to do with their bank account balance. In a world that increasingly measures worth through financial success, we lose sight of the qualities that truly matter: compassion, dignity, loyalty, and the courage to do what's right even when it costs us dearly. The most profound lesson from Francis's journey isn't about revenge or even justice. It's about the power of maintaining your integrity when others have lost theirs. When Madison revealed her true character by discarding Francis in his moment of need, she unknowingly gave him the greatest gift possible: clarity about who she really was. This clarity allowed Francis to make decisions based on his values rather than his emotions. True wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in how we treat others when we have the power to help or harm them. Francis chose help, and in doing so created a legacy that will outlast any material fortune. Every family faces moments that reveal who we truly are beneath the surface politeness and social expectations. Francis's story shows us that these moments of crisis, painful as they may be, often lead to the most authentic relationships and the deepest personal growth. The foundation he created wasn't just about helping strangers. It was about transforming his own pain into purpose, his rejection into redemption. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.